because when we were kids and she would read us bedtime stories, she just made it magical. She would become each character. And for evidence, after church, you should ask her to cackle like the Wicked Witches, because she specializes in that. Anyway, I did ask her to read Isaiah 58 as enthusiastically as she used to read us bedtime stories. And the reason is I think Isaiah 58 is one of the most powerful chapters of the whole Bible. If you understand Isaiah 58, you understand the Old Testament and you understand the heart of Jesus and how we as a church are supposed to live out the heart of Jesus. So I'm really tempted to just say, Mom, read Isaiah 58 again, and we're done. But I'm not going to, sorry. I do have to admit, I had a whole sermon written, and then I listened to Wendy's sermons over the last couple of weeks, and I thought, why am I preaching on Isaiah 58? This church already gets it. She's been preaching the heart of Isaiah 58 every week. So in the last few days, I actually changed my sermon completely. And I changed it to look at that last little bit of Isaiah 58 about the Sabbath that I think in our larger church culture doesn't make much sense. Isaiah has just given this powerful speech about God not wanting people to act and look religious, but instead all the things he wants God's people to do, to break the chains of injustice, to free people oppressed by powerful systems, feed the hungry, take care of the workers, house the unhoused, clothe the naked, take care of family in need instead of ignoring them. But from my experience, you all do this. And I know you all have been doing some really serious soul searching about how to do this even better. So instead of elaborating on this, I want to explore why Isaiah 58, this powerful passage, ends by talking about the Sabbath. And I come to the Sabbath passage with a lot of what you might call baggage. As many of you know, I married into a Seventh-day Adventist family after attending Loma Linda University, which is a Seventh-day Adventist graduate school in the healthcare fields. As their name says, their faith tradition literally centers the seventh day, which they believe is the Sabbath. I know I don't look like it, but I can be a bit of a rebel. If you tell me that we're supposed to wear a lot of makeup, I won't wear any. And if you tell me, oh, jewelry is sinful, well then I'm going to be wearing bangles and necklaces and earrings and everything like that. And the Sabbath kind of strikes me the same way because the way I've heard about it feels legalistic. And I rebel against that. I grew up reading Laura Ingalls Wilder, and her description in Farmer Boy of the Sabbath fundamentally explains how the American church has understood the Sabbath. People were supposed to sit still all day, maybe take naps and read their Bible, but fun things like sledding after a fresh snowstorm were strictly forbidden. And even though that was a long time ago, this idea still informs the church. If you haven't already heard this story from my mom, I'm going to tell it now. When I was in junior high and high school, my mom would show up after school or church towing the ski boat and loading me and all my friends who were with me into it to go to the lake after school or church. I think we taught half my class how to water ski, which dates me because I don't think kids water ski anymore. And I was a good kid, and most of my friends were church friends. So in high school, all of us would put on our swimsuits, and then we'd put on our Sunday clothes over the top of them and head off to church. And when church was over, there was my mom outside with her boat and an ice chest filled with food for teenagers. And our youth pastor laughed. He knew we were good kids and that we loved Jesus, and he thought my mom was great. But there were other adults from a more conservative background that started talking about my mom. As Isaiah 58 says, finger wagging, What kind of Christian was this that she would take all of these kids to the lake on Sunday? It really hurt her feelings, but it also made me start to wonder about this Sabbath thing, this day of rest. What was the Bible talking about, and where were these church people coming from? We definitely were not working at the lake. If you know anything about my mom, you know she specializes in fun. We were having good, clean fun, and we had gone to church. So I then went to a Christian college because, like the Sabbath question, I just had a lot of questions about my faith, and I wanted to go somewhere where they could answer them. But this Sabbath question remained and remained and really remained when I married my husband. All I could really get out of it is we were supposed to rest. When I traveled, I learned that Christians in Egypt celebrate Sabbath on Friday, when the Muslims are celebrating their holy day. In Nepal, Christians take their Sabbath on Saturday, because that's the one day of week that they don't have to work. And we take it on Sunday. Then I married my husband from a tradition that insisted it could only be on Saturday. Our first fights were about the Sabbath, because by then I recognized that no one really agreed. And I knew that Jesus said the Sabbath was not for God, but for man, while he healed someone on the Sabbath. I interpreted this as don't be legalistic, which of course, being the daughter of my mom, worked really well on my side of the family. And Paul had even said, don't get a tizzy. Don't get in a tizzy about the day of the week. I thought I had my bases covered, but I still had this nagging feeling about the Sabbath. Something was important about it that I wasn't really understanding. I went to seminary starting in 2017, and that is where it finally clicked. In Deuteronomy, we read, "Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son, your daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns, so that your male and female servants may rest, as you do." If you think about that list, it started with the most important person that had a household, went to son, daughter, and at the very end, after the animals, it talked about the foreigners in the town. And it said, so they can rest, as you do. "Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day." Sabbath was not about God declaring we take a nap every week, though as an adult I have really begun to appreciate that. It was more about making sure that the people most likely to get trampled on have a chance to rest. It was about giving them back their dignity, and it tells us why. "Remember, you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there." A weekly Sabbath is a reminder that they were slaves. Egypt had stripped them of their dignity and worked them like animals, and God freed them. So now, when they were the ones in charge, they were not supposed to act like Egypt. They were supposed to act like God, giving people back their dignity. The wealthy and established had freedom to rest all during the week. The Sabbath wasn't really for them. It was for everyone who was overworked. It was for people in our world who have 3 jobs trying to feed their family. It was for immigrants with no rights. It was even for the animals to get a rest. But for these weak creatures to get a rest, then the whole economy needed to stop for a day. The Israelites had to take a Sabbath so that they stopped demanding the work of those they relied on. But just like when my mom was criticized for taking kids to the lake on Sunday, in Jesus' time, the religious leaders got confused about the point of the Sabbath. Mark 2:23 tells us they criticized him for breaking the law when he plucked a piece of grain. Imagine what they would have said to my mom. Jesus responded, The Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind made for the Sabbath. Later, he demonstrates this again when he healed someone on the Sabbath, and he gets criticized again. And this time he goes full scale. And he says, they missed the whole point of the Sabbath. It was meant to give dignity to the people, to restore people. And that's how we get back to the rest of Isaiah 58. Real religion was not the show of following the rules. It was using what little power you had to take care of people and challenge injustice that oppressed them. Jesus lived Isaiah 58. He loved the very people the powerful government dismissed as worthless. And he loved them with dignity as people created in God's image. As Wendy preached about a year ago, the one person Jesus raised from the dead was Lazarus, who was likely mentally disabled. And she pointed out that if those in power had the opportunity to raise someone from the dead, it would not have been a mentally disabled man. Later, when Peter raised one person from the dead, of all the people, it was a woman. And the Bible calls her a disciple. Her name was Tabitha. Why did Peter raise her? Because she took care of those who had no way to survive without help, widowed women. Jesus made fishermen the bottom of society, his followers. He healed lepers. He healed the woman who was bleeding with menopausal bleeding for 10 years, and he praised her for seeking out help even after the doctors had taken all her money and made her more sick than when she started. Jesus lived Isaiah 58 to the point of allowing those in power to kill him rather than assuming their power structures to win. When Jesus was resurrected from the grave, it convinced followers that evil will not have the ultimate say. The powerless and worthless people